Good afternoon, everyone. This is, we're going to be calling the Select Board meeting for Kennebunkport Thursday, September 5th at 6:30. Miriam, would you like to open up your board?
Sure. We're opening a joint meeting, Kennebunk Select Board with the Kennebunkport Select Board.
Thank you. Introductions. We'll start off with introductions. I'm Alan Daggett, Chair.
Miriam Whitehouse, Chair. Go down. Yep.
I am Lisa Pratt, Secretary, Kennebunk.
Leslie Trenelange, Vice Chair, Kennebunk.
Kevin Tarian, Select Board Member for Kennebunk.
Bill Ward, Select Board Member, Kennebunk.
John Dykstra, Vice Chair for Kennebunkport.
Mary Beth Gilbert, Kennebunkport.
David Bancroft, Kennebunkport.
And I'm Heather Bolser, Town Manager for Kennebunk.
And I'm Lori Smith, Town Manager of the best little town in the state of Maine, Kennebunkport.
Whoa, she's throwing down the gauntlet.
So that's how it's going to go tonight, is it?
Interesting little town.
So I don't know if we have anybody on Zoom who's attending.
I think Courtney was going to.
Yeah, Courtney.
I'm here, you guys. How are you?
Hi, Courtney.
Sorry, I'm traveling. Sad to miss this.
So this is a special meeting with the Kennebunk and Kennebunkport Select Board, and we're going to be talking a little bit tonight about sustainability, resilience, and right now I'm going to turn this over to Laurie Smith, Kennebunkport Town Manager.
So do you want to talk about SMPDC?
Do we want to just?
I can't get this mic close enough to me. So tonight we have with us Corinna Grader from Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission. As you'll remember, both Kennebunk and Kennebunkport have partnered with two other communities to have a joint sustainability coordinator. And so we just both finished a climate action plan process and thought it would be great if Corinna updated both boards on possible collaborations.
I think this is good, yeah? Okay. Hi, all. As Lori said, I'm Corinna Grader from Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission. I know many of you from a lot of meetings over the past few years with that climate action planning process. And like Lori said, we finished the climate action plans, but really that's just the beginning of the work to start increasing our community resilience and implementing the strategies from the plan. So I wanted to give a quick update on that tonight, specifically about what we can do regionally and collaboratively to implement your climate action plans. So next slide. So just as a little background and reminder, as Lori mentioned, we started way back in 2019 with what we called a 2-year pilot sustainability and resilience program. That was with 6 of the coastal towns from Kennebunkport down to Kittery. And to this day, we're still working with 5 of those towns and still working together to implement sustainability and resilience initiatives across the board and share best practices. Part of that, we started a few years doing a lot of baseline work, figuring out where the communities were, what their priorities were. Kennebunkport, you guys set your climate action goals during that time. And then in 2022, we all agreed and took the journey together to begin the climate action planning process with Kennebunk, Kennebunkport, Kittery, as well as Biddeford through our cohort process. And that took about 2 years and a lot of work and a lot of support from you all, so thank you for that. And this year, both of your towns adopted your climate action plans, and both of you are in the process of forming new committees to implement those plans. So it was really great that the towns were able to move along sort of together, and as a result, there's a lot of opportunities for working together and working regionally to keep the progress going. So next slide. So just as a reminder, very generally, I'm not going to go through all of your climate action plan strategies, although I do have the executive summaries here if anyone needs a reminder. But in Kennebunk, you guys adopted 22 strategies with over 70 actions within those strategies. And part of the process we did with the CAP cohort was your task forces identify which strategies they thought could potentially be implemented at a regional level, because that made more sense than each community working on their own. And both of your communities actually took it a step farther, and Kennebunk identified strategies that could be potential joint actions with Kennebunkport. And then in Kennebunkport, you guys adopted 9 strategies with 24 sub-strategies, again, indicated some potential regional actions, and then indicated some strategies that could be potential partnership with the school district, which, of course, Kennebunk is also a part of, so could be a chance for collaboration. Next slide. So as I've sort of summarized, you guys have your own climate action plans, but you don't have to go alone in implementing those plans. And I wanted to kind of briefly describe the sort of different ways those actions could be implemented, and then give some updates and examples of projects to maybe discuss as a group together as the 2 towns. So the first are those potential regional actions, or actions that make sense to implement regionally because they're big problems that span municipal boundaries, that the impacts of implementing them include regional entities like the county EMA or SMPDC or the just the state in general. So those are actions that SMPDC or other regional entities can lead, but your community's role is really continuing to be a collaborator and a partner, as you have been in other regional projects we've done, and helping us bring those actions down to the local level. And then locally, obviously, there are a lot of actions that your communities can do. So your municipal staff or you as boards can help to set policies and implement, and can work with committees to lead. But for those local actions, we at SMPDC, as your regional planning organization, are here to support you in those. And I'll go into a bit more later the ways that we're providing support this year and for the years coming forward. And then finally, those joint actions. So maybe there are actions that both of your communities are interested in, and that it would be helpful to collaborate on and coordinate on. And maybe SMPDC can support, but again, it's sort of things that you guys as your own boards can more effectively implement than, say, us trying to do it from the outside. Next slide. So this is just a quick update on regional actions that we are working on. And this is to show that since the climate action plans passed in this spring and this summer, we're already underway on a lot of regional actions. The first one is electric grid resilience. So both of your towns identified power outages and grid reliability as an issue and something you wanted to take action on, but something that clearly working with CMP as the state, the Southern Maine electricity provider, you guys couldn't do much on your own. So I'm actually very happy to share that we were just awarded a grant from the Economic Development Administration to start a regional Southern Maine Energy Resilience Plan process with stakeholders, including, we got a letter of support from CMP. So hoping that it will be a great opportunity to build communication and collaboration, and hopefully help with CMP's planning to incorporate your local needs and concerns about power outages. Another thing we've already started on pursuing funding for is transportation infrastructure vulnerability assessments. So that's something that was identified that the climate action plan's vulnerability assessment really didn't get into nitty-gritty transportation needs or the impacts of things like groundwater rise and saltwater intrusion on the transportation infrastructure. So we've started putting together some grant applications for that. So hopefully there will be a project coming forward focused on that priority. Another one is the residential weatherization and electrification. You might have heard already that we were selected for a grant from the Department of Energy to stand up a multi-municipal weatherization electrification program that will provide technical assistance and incentives to homeowners in your communities. We're still waiting on the funds to be awarded. Currently looking like sometime this fall, but as soon as we get the funds, we'll be ready to get that program up and running. So that's one to look forward to in the coming months, hopefully, or year. And then finally, the coastal resilience planning that is sort of like looking at what the regional needs are and what are tools and data and peer learning that can support the infrastructure projects you do locally. We are continuing to convene a coastal adaptation working group that's built out of the previous Climate Ready Coast project we did with your towns. And we're also working with the Wells Reserve to develop a nature-based solutions digital mapping tool. And then one thing we would like to do that was included in both of your plans and we're currently looking at funding to do is a groundwater rise and saltwater intrusion analysis, not just for the transportation infrastructure, but also its impact on wells and septic systems and water infrastructure. Next slide. Okay, so that was a very quick summary of regional actions. And I just wanted to provide some quick examples of the things that are local actions that, you know, it's up to your community to implement, but that we can support as a regional planning organization. Those include local zoning updates, efforts to do fleet electrification, changes to your capital improvement program policy, as well as the infrastructure resilience projects like the ones that Kennebunkport and Kennebunk have both been doing in the wake of recent storms and disasters. Next slide. So SMPDC, there are a lot of ways that we can assist this, and really it's whatever your community needs, we're here to support. We can help develop more in-depth implementation plans for your climate action plans, is looking at what actions are things we can start to tackle now and how we'll do it. We will continue, as we always do, to assist with project scoping, grant funding, grant administration, and project management, provide technical expertise, and also serve as a connection between your towns and experts at the state or federal level or other folks that can provide assistance to you. Assist with coordination and facilitation between the town staff and your new climate-focused committees, and then also support community outreach and engagement. So this is just a brief list of the different ways we can and will assist, and happy to discuss, especially what you guys feel the needs are in the coming year for your communities. And then next slide. Okay, so finally, the areas for joint collaboration. So these are some things I pulled out of the plans that were either indicated by you guys as being areas for potential joint action or potential collaborations with the school. One of the big ones that has been ongoing and that we'll hear about later tonight is the coastal resilience efforts for Lower Village and Dock Square. There's been a lot of different projects that have sort of looked into the flooding issues in this area and ways that you guys could move forward to keep working on that and find some solutions that will help your communities. Increase opportunities for walking and biking between the two communities, so building connections and ways for people to enjoy and experience your communities, maybe outside of their cars and in a safe way. Working with the school or working together as municipalities on, joint procurement for solar, EVs, and energy upgrades. And then tonight, I hope that we get to hear from you all any other ideas you guys have for collaborating. What are your priorities on climate actions for the coming year? Are they the same? And if so, are there some ways that we could work together to further both of our efforts? And that's it. So thank you so much for the time. And I don't know exactly if we want to do discussion now or wait till the next presentation.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that, Corinna and the team at SMPDC have been invaluable to both communities. I think that partnership with other communities has allowed us to be more eligible for grants than we would have singularly because we all have different demographics. Kittery, for example, has much more of a workforce, and their connection with Portsmouth Naval Shipyard brings opportunities that we wouldn't have as Kennebunkport alone. Also, by not just having one sustainability coordinator, which is what the town of York chose to do, which is why they're no longer part of our group, is that we have a team that really each has different strengths and they work in concert together. You've opened up so many grant opportunities for us and collaborations that we could not individually or without your assistance have moved forward. So I just want to say thank you.
Thanks, Lori.
Absolutely, thank you very much. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would just say the same for Kennebunk as well. Absolutely ditto. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather.
So what did you guys think? Were there any ideas that you thought were appropriate to act on, or you want to mull those over, or are there other concerns that weren't on the list that you think we should put on?
I would like to talk a little bit about the resiliency project that we're looking at on the river, the Kennebunk River. We flood out, you guys flood out in the lower village, and it was terrible in January. And I'm feeling that we really need to hire an engineering firm to look at what we can do with the river, whether it would be a floodgate or if it would be a levee or whatever. And I know, Laura, you said that you looked into that a little bit, and it was like around $250,000 to $300,000. We sure would like to partner with you. We'd be willing. I mean, if we lose the downtown, Kennebunkport, or if we lose the lower village, I mean, you guys had, I was over to Dwight Raymond's place, he had over 1.5 feet of water, just in that area. And I don't know whether it's gonna get worse or whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen, but we need to start taking care of some of these problems that's been here for quite a while.
How, can you explain a little bit for all of us how the floodgate works? How you envision that?
Well, I don't know whether a floodgate, whether they would want a floodgate there, or whether they'd want a levee where they'd hold up more water when it comes in with the surge and whatnot, because that's what the problem is the surge, especially when it's a southerly wind, high winds, that water from the ocean gets pushed in, and it doesn't necessarily go out as fast as it normally would with a tide, a regular tide, and that's what the problem is. And January storm was a southerly wind, and it really flooded. I had over 2 feet of water in Port Lobster. The whole Ocean Avenue was flooded in 3 or 4 places. I mean, we were watching propane tanks float down on Ocean Avenue. So, and this is happening more and more as we go. I've had Port Lobster now for almost 10 years, and it seems to be getting, these storms seem to be getting worse all the time. I mean, bigger storms. When I first bought Port Lobster, it would flood out maybe not even once a year. Last year, it flooded out 4 times. So I do know that we're getting a grant to go ahead and put a wall up around our building. But that's not going to fix the problem. The problem is either the roads need to be raised, or we need a levee to hold more water from the river coming down and the ocean coming in, meeting the river, or it could be a floodgate. We just don't know. But we would like to hire somebody, a firm, that could give us some ideas and some what we should be able to do.
I guess I'm just wanting to understand, if you block the water from the river, where does it go?
Right, I think, yeah,
Who's gonna, and
Right.
do you create another problem?
right, you have to, I think, learn how to work with the water and not against it, because the water will win every time.
So
Yeah.
another thing
I'm
is.
sure the experts.
Well, I think, yeah, I think
That's
that's,
what
I
I
think
need.
that's part of it,
I
is to
mean-
say if there's, you know, so one of the big takeaways that I personally took when we took the tour the day after the storm, with Lori and the chiefs and the select board, is, you know, the cumulative effect that we see going on in our town cannot be any different than your town because of the ages of both towns. So, and we both saw some catastrophic issues, but at the same time, like some of the streets that we saw pull up, Biddeford has the same issue. You know, you can start seeing that that's just wear and wear and wear and wear. And so I think, you know, both of us are collectively going around our ocean areas doing what we can. But when we sat down and we were coming up with what key things would we want to start to look at from a resiliency project, this is what, you know, Alan's talking about, which is we saw the river itself as being something that, to your point, you know, where does the water go? But without at least sticking our toe in the water, literally, with an engineering firm and saying, what's the art of possibility here? You know, what can we achieve? What makes sense without pushing the water to Biddeford or, you know, Wells or, you know, jokingly. But, you know, to that point, you know, what is done. And so I think that's where our board got, is to the point where seems to be the right time to undertake that study, and then discussions happen about what is the best option because of whatever side effects, if any, that the engineering analysis would come back with.
Can we, if I may ask, if we do that collaboratively, maybe as two towns looking at that same engineering issue, because you've got the issue with the Ocean Avenue going by your establishment out there, and also we have, of course, the Mother's Beach and Gooch's Beach area, but also in the same vein, in a very similar scenario that you have, we also have Route 9 going by where that recently built bridge is over the Mousom. And that's an area that this year was underwater 2 or 3 times, which is very unusual for it. So how does that bridge get raised, or if that's a possibility? I'm a little concerned that perhaps, I'm not sure if raising the road is going to be, there may be some DEP rules or things like that that may interfere with some of our plans, but it would be a good idea to at least get some idea engineering-wise about what we can do as we look down the road about Middle Beach and about Gooch's Beach, because those waves this year broke after they crossed over the top of the seawall. They didn't just slam into the seawall. If we go back to the 1970s, you and I, I'm sure, have been around a day or two. You remember 72. I'm sure you remember 78. And all of a sudden this year, what made 78 and this one only more devastating was the fact that the crash of the ocean happened further in. I saw seawalls, walls on the other side of the road that took damage that we didn't have before, that we didn't have in 72 and 78.
This was a bad one.
Yeah, and I mean, the water was only just a little bit higher,
And
so.
these are the problems that's been here forever.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Like, we have 4 or 5, maybe 6 places in town that's always flooded out. But it doesn't seem like it's getting any easier, it's getting worse. These storms are a little stronger, it seems like. And not going back to what we could do, whether it be a floodgate or a levee, or, you know, the water displacement is only so much. There's only so much water that's coming in from the ocean. Whether you dredge the harbor or dredge a part of the sides of the river to take that extra water. Now, the water comes in and the water goes out. So you've got about, you know, it takes 6 hours roughly from low to high water, 6 hours to lose it, but you also have water coming down the river. So in that span of time, it all depends on when the storm and the high tides are.
Yep. And as we look down the road
How much
also,
of an effect it's gonna be.
we have to watch out for Seabreeze Acres in the process of doing that, because that water spreads out, as you know.
Right.
But that would be part of, so that would be part of the analysis, because we're also doing, so I don't know if you're aware, but we have a list for our resiliency projects that we're coming up with. So that was one of them. Pier, the head of the harbor, is the other one, down at Wamby Beach. is another one. Dyke Road, Causeway, we just finished. So as the board, and with the town managers and Lori, we've gone through and said, okay, here's our priority list. And this one that we're talking about specifically, you got, you're into half of it, in terms of, so I think that's when we're talking about where should we, where could we, this is one of those places where we literally meet in the middle of the river. So we'd like to understand, we've already sort of thought through it collectively as a board, but we don't know where you guys are in your thought process. I'm hearing a couple parts that you're thinking about of your areas, but was this one of them that you were considering?
Oh, yeah.
How does it sound?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think that you are ahead of us as far as identifying things. We haven't quite gotten there yet. And I think we need to also recognize that our needs are definitely different than your needs, as far as yours is primarily affecting Dock Square, while flooding does affect Lower Village. It's also primarily the residents along Beach Ave. So I think that, we have to keep that in mind, but I think also that this is sort of, we need to think about our needs, like this, we haven't had these conversations yet.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we could commit to anything at this point. But I appreciate that you guys are already identifying your points of resilience. That's just my thought. I don't think that we're ready to commit to anything.
Yeah, I mean, we can share, because Lori, you guys did, with the directors, you guys had a little sheet of, some of the topics about where, sort of the, what do I want to call, metrics, and what projects impacted what types of stuff. So I do think this is an interesting point, and I think, and one thing to think about too is like when we were talking as a board was, what does it look like if we do nothing, right? Just because of the infrastructure aging, so what does it look like if we do nothing? So say collectively, if we do nothing between Kennebunk and Kennebunkport in this area, what does it look like? Because the structures are aging and we're going to get storms. You can say whether they're catastrophic storms or whatever, they're storms. There's going to be more damage. So if say, argument's sake, catastrophic, our Kennebunkport port is gone, what does that do to Kennebunk itself? Because I think we draw the line, but, a lot of people talking about Kennebunk and Kennebunkport don't seem to draw that line.
Well, obviously,
Right.
We're interconnected, and
Right.
and I don't think anybody here would deny that, if you're hurt, it's going to hurt all of us, and that we are going to all be hurt by this. My question is, are your resources such that the engineering studies or whatever that need to be done to lay out our choices, our options for dealing with this, is that something that you would be providing for us?
Well, SMPDC is not engineers, but we can help you.
Nor are we.
Yeah, right. But we know lots of good ones. And that's a great question because I was actually talking to Abby Sherwin, our coastal resilience specialist, about this earlier, the Lower Village Dock Square project you guys have been looking at for the engineering. I think way back when with Heather and Lori, we met to talk about grant funding. That area, if you remember, we did a regional coastal resilience study called Climate Ready Coast. That was funded through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation with funds from NOAA. And that area, Lower Village Dock Square, was identified as one of, I think it was 12 priority vulnerable sites in the region in terms of climate hazards and impacts, as well as, since it's National Fish and Wildlife, the impact to ecosystems and wildlife. And because in that plan that came out of it, the Regional Coastal Resilience Plan, that site is identified as a priority vulnerable site. That sets you guys up for their funding pipeline of projects, which is planning, permitting and engineering, final engineering, and then construction. So a project like this would be highly competitive for another National Fish and Wildlife grant for the permitting and initial engineering stage. The one caveat to that is that that whole funding stream is really focused on nature-based solutions and ecosystem and wildlife impacts. So things like a floodgate, is not a nature-based solution. So it would have to be part of you would look at the permitting stage. You could consider those, you could consider levies, and come out of that report and find what is the best fit for Kennebunk and Kennebunkport. If that incorporates nature-based solutions, then you can move along to the next phase of their funding pipeline. If not, then you have the preliminary designs and engineering, and you can try and identify another funding source to pay for those upgrades.
So I have a question. If Kennebunk and Kennebunkport were to work together on this, would it be easier to get the funding?
Certainly, collaborative projects are more competitive, yes. And working with other regional partners like the Wells Reserve, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
You kind of jumped to where I was going to go to when Lori asked if we had things we wanted to work on. And I think that, looking at nature-based solutions and effects on the ecosystem is definitely more important to me. What I was going to say that I think came to light this summer is the water quality of the Kennebunk River and what we can do collaboratively to improve that. Because I think that that's a huge draw for both our towns, not just because it brings people to Dock Square and Lower Village, but the river itself is really important. And so I would like to improve the actual river and its quality and its, I know there's a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Erosion.
Erosion.
And I know the River Committee is looking at the erosion issue and things like that, but that's where I am. I want to improve the actual river because I think that that's a huge benefit and draw for tourists and people in town.
So I have one other question, and again, I'm not an engineer, but the bridge lower in Dock Square, which used to be a drawbridge.
Right.
Did the fact that it's an immovable force impact the flooding? Where I'm going with this is wondering if you could open it up when there's a surge and let the water go through. Would that help? Would that cause other problems? I mean, I was just thinking about it and wondering about it, and
Well, I don't think that bridge can be opened. I don't even know whether they could.
Well, now it can't.
Right, but I don't even know whether they could make that.
Well, it's a question. You could rebuild the bridge
That's right.
in a way, but again, that's the kind of engineering question we want to look at. I mean, it's constricted there. It's pretty narrow going through that piece anyway. But it's a good question. What does that do? And that's why I think this study is so important to do, and hopefully to have some way to fund it together. If I heard Corinne correctly, there is an avenue, even if we don't know we're going to be nature-based at this point, to do the study, just to find it. One of the real questions is in that watershed, when we have a big storm and we have a lot of rain, which we're seeing, what is the amount of fresh water that's trying to get to the sea? And that's going to be a critical question. And that hydrology hasn't been done, that study, and that's part of that 300K number. It wasn't just the engineering of solutions, but more important, I think, initially, it's what is the volume of water, both fresh and the sea is pretty straightforward, but the fresh water is the unknown. So that's really what we're hoping to do this study, because and also knowing that is going to help us both in our drainage systems upstream in terms of handling the conduits, the road erosion, and the other factors that we're going to be dealing with when these atmospheric rivers come and do their best to flood us out.
And it all depends on how much rain you get, too.
Oh, that's what I mean. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. So I think what I'm hearing is an action is to maybe put together, try to look at a grant opportunity that maybe the two of us then, as can talk about approaching it and finding some matching funds between us to get something to happen. So, and I was curious on that, Corinne, maybe just when you were bringing up, you had those 4 different areas, winterization and electrification. How is that going to happen? The grant money comes, just on a 50,000-foot level, what are the steps? How do you see it? Would you come and say, we've got this, give us some ideas? Or what's the interaction you see between
With
y'all
the
that have the
town?
money and we all that want to spend it?
So that project, we're calling it the Southern Maine Energy Navigator Program, and its form and implementation plan is pretty set. The town of Kittery is actually receiving the funds. They were the lead applicant, and SMPDC and York County Community Action Corporation are the 2 partners. SMPDC, we're managing the program it's the 5 pilot towns still that are participating. And York County Community Action Corporation is actually doing the weatherization and home energy upgrades for low and moderate income homeowners. So how it will work is we'll have energy navigators at our office. We'll have 2 of them who will be the people who provide technical assistance to your community members and homeowners who are interested. And then if they are low or moderate income, they'll also be eligible for incentives that will stack with the current Efficiency Maine incentives to help reduce barriers folks usually currently experience to install heat pumps or weatherize their homes, because folks often don't have the upfront cash to then get a rebate. So your role as the town, with the committee hopefully, is to help us find folks who are interested and do a lot of the outreach and engagement, but really the management of the program is with SMPDC. So that's another example, sort of like Lori was saying, where because we're working regionally and because we can take on the work of creating and running and overseeing the program, you guys can have a much bigger program in your community than you would be able to stand up on your own.
So we're identifying the points where it's needed.
Yeah, helping with outreach, talking to people, getting them connected.
Yeah, and Corinna, can you just clarify, because the money will help upfront that cost, but then when the rebate is given back, it comes back?
Some of it does, yeah.
So we can have some revolving money?
Exactly, yeah. And then that money that comes back will be more flexible, so we can hopefully use it to help people who maybe, federal income requirements or documentation requirements can be really strict and difficult, and people can fall through the cracks, so we can use that revolving funds to sort of help in those cases, which will be really great.
So, John is that a real action that John spoke? Did we all agree, or?
To approach SMTP to try to look for putting together a grant to do a study on our watershed. Does that sound like just on a thought? I mean, you're not committing to anything.
Putting it out there, if the solutions we're looking for are primarily nature-based, which is, I think, just better for the long-term planning, then I personally would be for it. I think, to Lisa's earlier point, this conversation is a little bit early for us, only because, if you remember, you guys in Kennebunkport approved your climate action plan, I think, several months before we got there, right? So we're just a little bit behind you with discussing and things. And I have one more question that's might be a little bit off the subject. And I've lived here a long time, 20 years this year. And what is Wandby Beach?
Wandby Beach. The Wandby actually was a shipwreck.
Yeah, but where is that?
It is just above, if you say the north or east of Walker Point. So it's the next inlet, just past Walker Point Bush Compound.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
I get
yeah.
that. Yeah, but
So where it's really low there,
Oh,
where that
okay,
mega
thank
house
you.
is back over the marsh. Yeah.
Closed all winter.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And that's the first time that I can remember that it was ever closed.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Okay.
There's been a couple of storms, not anywhere near as bad as that last one, but that was, it flooded, but it was always real.
Okay, because I wasn't sure if it was like, I was like, have I been calling Colony Beach the wrong name
No,
for this
Colony-
long? But
Colony's
Colony Beach is
different.
Colony
Colony's-
Beach. It's
Colony's
like, this is
Colony
further.
Beach.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Further down.
The
Okay.
ship trying to get to Portland that
Yeah,
missed.
when I was a kid, the boiler was still out there from the ship.
Oh, right.
Back in the field, I am. But if anybody has a picture of that, I would kill to have that. I just remember that as a kid, just seeing that thing out there.
I remember it too, Joe.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
So I think that we're not ready to commit to anything, like I said. I think that's a conversation we need to have with Heather and probably Chris. And I don't know, maybe we want to involve Karina. I don't know at this point what are, how people are all involved. But I think that I would feel better about like sitting down and having the select board review the climate action plan and looking at our priorities and things like that. I'm just not ready to commit to it yet. But like Leslie said, I would be more excited about nature-based solutions as opposed to a dike or a dam. And we did, with the climate initiative, have some conversations about that with the community, which I thought were pretty enlightening as well. So you might be able to further the conversation.
I'll just jump in too here. As has already been said, we haven't had a chance to really talk about this, but an opportunity for us to work together is something that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Nature-based solution preferred, but we don't know that yet. We don't know what the solutions might look like. So this first step of doing an engineering solution makes a lot of sense. Can't commit dollars, but if there's an opportunity to partner in order to apply for a grant, I think that, personally, I think that's a great idea. We'll see if we get further. Like you can tell, we haven't had a chance to talk about it because we don't have the same point of view on this at this point. But I do think that would be something that would make a lot of sense. And then as we have a chance to prioritize all the efforts that we have for the climate action plan, then we'll be able to determine if we have any funds that might be available. But at this point, we don't know what the top priorities are for our town. And we'll have to take a look at that so we know that before we come back to you.
How many spots in Kennebunk are you looking at to try to get some resilience money or whatever to? Is it
That's
4 or 5?
part of our discussion,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right,
We're-
right.
So we have a
Have you,
job behind you.
I have a quick question. Does the Kennebunkport Select Board, have you established your climate action plan committee yet? Is that firmly established?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
see, we're still in the
Yeah.
interview stages
Yeah.
for ours, and we plan to, our second meeting in September, we will be announcing who our committee members are. So we're, like I said, we're a little bit behind you guys.
Not that far.
No, not that far, but, and I think this will be on a very soon in the future, discussion on our agenda, I would imagine.
That's good.
So we won't keep things hanging for long.
Good.
But I do agree that engineering is where we have to start.
gotta
We
start,
we
yeah.
need to know
Yep.
How
what,
big's the problem?
yeah, we also need to know what the possible solutions are before we can
Right.
decide.
I mean,
which
there
way
might
to
be
go.
2 or 3 solutions.
Yeah.
We just need to pick the best
Exactly.
one.
Or we may be able to do several things at once.
Right, exactly right.
It's also a time frame. There's near term, short, and midterm, so that's, yeah. Cool. We've certainly burnt a lot of the first one, so we maybe we ought to move along.
Yeah, I think that went well.
Great, thank you all so
Karina,
much.
Thank you.
We have to start
Hey,
somewhere.
Corinna, I just have one other question. You were talking about the energy aspect of it, and you mentioned Central Maine Power.
Yes.
What I didn't hear was Kennebunk Light and Power. Will they be involved in it, or is this
We
pretty
will
much?
definitely reach out to them, but
Okay.
we didn't involve them in the initial application because there's
right.
just too much.
Thank you.
So next we have another grant opportunity that we worked on with the state GoPIF funds, was doing some public engagement work with the climate initiative on the flooding in Dock Square and Lower Village. And so the climate initiative is going to give us a little update on their findings.
Hello, everyone. My name is Megan Cooper. I'm an Arundel resident, and I work at the Climate Initiative. I head up our marketing and communications. So I am not the super smart sciencey people that I am lucky to work with every day, but I'm so excited to be here as a community partner because the work that we did this past year and a half with the town in terms of community engagement and, more importantly, intergenerational conversations and connection points over the climate issues that we're seeing in our towns has really been incredible. And a lot of the conversations and questions that you brought up tonight are the same ones that your constituents are having. So I would love to just walk you through a few slides of what we were able to accomplish together over the last year and a half. Awesome. All right, so we called it the CAG project. So the CAG project was the Climate Action Grant. And essentially, just a quick background on the climate initiative. We were the Kennebunkport Climate Initiative. We were born out of the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust, and I'm standing here today after 5 years of working at TCI because of a class that started with the high school and with the local college. And so that class, actually, we were able to digitize, and what started here in Kennebunkport is now in all 50 states and educating 300,000 high school students across the country. So really, really cool stuff happening right here and really at the forefront of climate change impacts. So what we did is our roots are still a huge part of who we are, and we engaged Kennebunk high school students, 32 of them, in the class, the Gulf of Maine Field Studies class, which is still happening today, as well as the Environmental Club, to become ambassadors in Kennebunkport, Kennebunk, and Arundel to bring community members together to talk about some of the questions that are coming up tonight. And so essentially what we saw over the last year and a half is 14 community conversations, 200 plus community members who took time out of their schedules, and many familiar faces here that came to support us. And we had 32 youth facilitators who walked these community members through conversations. So I'm going to share just a few stats before we get into the meat of what we talked about. So these conversations, if we're not getting them in front of community members, we're really missing out on something. And I think what we saw in January, people who didn't want to talk about climate change before wanted to talk about climate change. And so it was this incredible opportunity, and there's no better facilitator than a young person in this community who cares about where they are growing up and where they want to come back to work and start a family. And yes, high schoolers actually are thinking about this kind of stuff nowadays. It's crazy. But to care and to open up these conversations. So what we did from a community partner outreach perspective is really launch a digital campaign where we were able to reach community members across different digital platforms as well as in person through signage, that kind of thing, to bring them to the table. And so just some fun numbers in terms of we were able to reach 67,000 community members, and you'll kind of see that funnel continue down to those 200 folks that actually converted to people in the seats. And we had an incredible culminating event that happened this June at the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust that actually brought in different thought leaders and experts to talk about some of the solutions that community members brought to the table. Next slide, please. So what we learned, and is our awesome youth cohort.
And one of them is mine. Sorry, just had to put that up.
Our community conversations are all about just bringing people together to storytell, because by having a shared story and a shared sense of place, that's when people start to open up and think about some of the impacts that are happening. So we had increased awareness. So community members reported higher, and we had post-event surveys on all of this, reported higher awareness of sea level rise projections and town efforts after participating in these conversations. People also who did not know that you all have been working really hard at climate action plans were really excited to hear more about that. I think there's more work to be done in terms of communicating that out. The intergenerational value was unbelievable, tangible, emotional. People from both ends of the spectrum were really able to just come to this shared place of conversation and understanding and confusion too. But this, a lot of people just left with hope that, okay, these conversations are happening here. you do want to hear what we're worried about and what we think could be possible solutions. And I think just hearing it from these youth voices really made people open up. Adaptation priorities, so strong support for seeking federal support, grant opportunities, changes to streetscape. We had business members in this community, we were talking, there were some, everybody was just open about throwing out ideas. Do we raise things? Do we, put in floodgates? A lot of the same things that you were just talking about, these questions came up. And this program, I also want to say, by the end of it, the youth who were participating, most of them all said that being a part of this made them really want to consider, first of all, looking for leadership opportunities on boards like this to share their voices, but also climate career interest in terms of next steps, which is really, really exciting. Next slide, please. So a few of our findings, and this is all distilled in a final report. This one's really awesome, I think. Improved communication. So we all tend to kind of talk in different silos. At the end of this, so many people were like, we're towns who still read our paper. We still open up our paper. Like, is there an area where SMPDC and the Climate Initiative and our towns and our state representatives who were there at that culminating event, like, get a one-liner from folks? What are we doing? What's the latest news? What are some of the things that we're exploring? People are interested. And so I think that there really is a communications opportunity for us to think more seriously about. And it could not be a huge lift. Continued engagement, so intergenerational community conversations. It was just a great way to get people to open up and to be talking about some of the things that you all are reviewing now and moving forward. Youth empowerment, obviously. I just think the relationship with these students and listening to these students, they're learning, and some of the ideas that they're coming up with, these youth are now really looking at climate action plan for RSU 21 and moving forward kind of these conversations, these presentations that you see in these pictures to more tangible outcomes. So phased adaptation was something that came out as well, developing comprehensive phased approaches to infrastructure adaptation. A lot of focus was on Dock Square and just what we all saw happen here in January, as it was very top of mind. And then address barriers, which you all are looking at. So I think people want a follow-up of like, okay, these climate action plans happen, like really, what is the next step? And having meetings like this is wonderful, but your average person maybe is not listening to these recordings. And so how are other ways that we can continue these conversations and the momentum and make sure, that we are continuing to have these community conversations. So I think that is our last slide. Yes, I'm happy to answer any questions. After your wonderful presentation, this is really just bringing these conversations and where you all decide to go next. We loved partnering with you in terms of the community outreach and continued engagement piece. So happy to answer any questions that I can.
Can I have any of these kids come and spoken to any of the climate committees that we haven't? Obviously Kennebunk hasn't named their members, but we have. Have they come and talked to any of them? Or can we get them to come and talk to our climate action group?
I think that's a wonderful idea.
And
I think it would be a wonderful idea to have, positions for youth, committees for youth on those as well. And the time wasn't until now to even think about that, right? Like a lot of the work, I know it's been a very busy year for those committees, but these youth, like their perspectives, it's extremely valuable. So I love that idea.
Well, I think it would be a good idea for them and the committee.
Yes.
I was a panelist at the culminating event and had some conversations with some of the students who were very interested in, I discussed the Kennebunk Climate Committee, and they were very interested in joining, but how then we reach out to them and let them know that we're moving that forward is probably the, how do we move that? Like, I don't have their contact information and things like that, So letting them know, so maybe we need to communicate with you and let you know, because we've always been trying to get youth involved in our energy efficiency committee and our, you know, some of the community conversations that we've had around climate action. So I think, you know, creating a partnership with you guys will be really important.
Awesome.
I think maybe one way to reach out to the students is, you know, through the guidance office at the high school, right? And the science classes, and just to see, hey, you know, here's some opportunities outside school. Please consider joining. Because I know a lot of the kids that were shown in the photos are now off to their, you know, university or next chapters, but there's another group coming up.
Yes, and that class is still there in the environmental groups. Yeah. Awesome.
Any more questions for Megan?
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the update.
Okay, you're up now.
So thanks so much. We appreciate it. Thanks, Karina, as well. So we, in working with both select boards, we just brought up some topics that we are both involved in here. So we've got some status reviews. So short-term rentals. So I know you have been doing that and looking at that process and regulation more recently than Kennebunk. We just recently went to the voters to start a registration process and got that approved. So that information's in the packet materials. And I don't know if anyone's got any questions about what you all are doing or what we're doing, but happy to answer any of those questions.
So you're just registering the short-term rentals? You're just registering the short-term rentals?
Yep, we're registering them.
Licensing?
Yeah, similar to that, yes. And there's a safety checklist, then the fire department does a review, and then if you pass all that, then you get a sticker that shows that you've gone through the process. So that's kind of, it's a registration process at this point. We don't have any caps, we don't have, no. So it's pretty safety focused at this point.
So how many, have you started this already?
Nope, starts January 1. We just got it approved by the voters in June.
Oh, okay.
So you have no idea how many short-term rentals you have in Kennebunk?
I mean, we have some idea, but we
You
don't have any
you know,
actual
so many
data
you
yet.
don't have licenses like we
Right,
do.
exactly. So our hope is to go through this for about a year and get some information about who's registering, if there's any gap there, you know, what that all looks like, and if there are any further steps in the future.
How are you defining short-term?
It's 15 days or less.
1.5, wow.
Yep.
We're 30, aren't we? Are we 30 or are we 1.5? We 15?
So there was, I think Kennebunk has, if you're doing it for only 14 days a year, you don't have to register, I believe. So it's 15 days or more, I think. Whereas we didn't take that approach. It was talked about when we were going through the regulation. Because of the IRS rules, it was brought up as a potential idea. So we are anything under 30 days.
30 days, I thought we
I had one question for Kennebunkport on this topic.
Yes.
Sorry, I just was wondering, so, you know, we obviously did extensive research on this well, I've been on the board, this is my 4th year, and for 3 years prior to even laying out a research with what other towns are doing. And I think one of the biggest from going in the way that you guys did alone, obviously there's a lot of towns doing it that way, is how have you found that it is to actually manage and implement a fee structure? How do you police this? You know, you guys have it very strict with like the turnover, how many days, how many people per room, all these things. Like someone going and knocking on the door on Friday to say account, you know, to me, how is that manageable, and how have you found it to be? Is there any changes you would make to what you've currently done?
So in terms of managing it, first of all, we take the application, people sign off that they're meeting all the requirements, and we have these good neighbor guidelines that they must abide by, as well as safety measures. And so when we get the application, and if they're a new applicant, we first compare it to our assessor records. And so if they are saying they're allowed 2 people per bedroom and an additional 2 people on top of that. So if they're saying they're renting a 3-bedroom, but our assessor's record says that they only are, have 2-bedroom and only have a septic system for 2-bedroom, then that's the first thing we address with them. And there were people who were doing some of that that we talked to early in the process. Others were, there were some facilities being rented that were not residential dwelling units, and so by our land use definition, we addressed those issues as well. And some people could, there might be a house with a carriage house next door that didn't have cooking facilities, et cetera, and they were renting both, and now they're only allowed to rent one. So through that process, the first time around, we addressed most of those issues. We also said that we would do an inspection within the first 5 years. And so crew has been out doing so many inspections a year, and as we see items, we address those with people. I think the challenge has been, people who do not register and for us to follow up with them. So we do have a software program, and we just changed to a new software program, which goes out there and analyzes all online records over many, many, many search engines, et cetera. And then they locate them on a map and line them up, and they have an automated system that will send out violation letters. They have a 1-800 number, so neighbors can complain about something and submit pictures online, and we can send violation letters. So the software was an important piece of that. I would say if somebody is not renting online, then that's an issue. If you're doing it by word of mouth, I mean, there's very few people in that category, but certainly that's one way. And I'd say, just like any code officer will tell you, our best informants are the neighbors.
We also passed on the board, we just passed the scale.
Yeah, and they just passed a penalty fine. So I'd say overall, since we adopted it, I would say, knock on wood, but I have not gotten complaints about rental units. I think our planning and code office has gotten a few from some zealous neighbors, but our complaints have really dropped down. I would say most everybody is complying. I'd say it's really been successful. It is a lot of staff time and work, and we did hire an additional person and invest in software, et cetera. But I think all in all, we've got a lot of good compliance.
Yeah, and I would just add our good neighbor policy and our FAQs and a number of those documents, we used yours as the template to start with, so we appreciate all your work as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank
See,
you
we're
for
sharing things already.
That's right.
I have a question. Have the fees that you've charged, have they covered the costs of your program?
Yes, I would say, it's one of the things that the board struggled with when they were setting fees. So we looked at different communities and what fees they were charging, and we came up with what we thought were potential costs for the program, a lot of this being staff time, and put together 3 different fee schedules. The board at that time decided they wanted to have a larger fee for larger places, and they differentiated it between the 3-bedroom and less and 4-bedroom and more. I'd say that's probably not as common that you'll see out there, unless you're looking at something like in Portland where there's multifamily units, and they're very focused on owner-occupied units. So I think in general, the fees are covering the costs. Because we don't do program budgeting, we don't apply every staff hour to that program. And so, we do an analysis throughout the year, but it's not exact.
And how about the software program that you purchased? Was that on top of that?
On top of the costs?
Yeah, I mean, did
It was included
cover
in
the
our
cost of
cost
that as well?
analysis, yeah.
Just another question too, on the caps. I know you have caps on how many short-term rentals there can be, particularly in certain areas. Is there a long waiting list for this? I know there's been a natural peak and sort of an ebb in short-term rentals that have been available. I know the prices have come down, et cetera, just a natural post-pandemic, you might say. But is there a long waiting list, and how long is that?
Well, that was one of the questions, is how long will people have to wait? So certainly when a house transfers, if it's not an in-family transfer, that house then gets put back out in the group, and you have to reapply. So when I talked to the city of Portland before we did this, and I said, what's the flow? What's the ebb and flow with your cap? And they said, really, we don't have an issue. At the time they said this, and that, usually people go off on years and people come back in. I would say that we have found that to be true. I would say it isn't, at the end of our licensing cycle, which we do on a calendar year basis, it would not be uncommon to have 15 or 20 people on the waiting list. But then we have normally, we've only had 2 renewal periods, so I don't have a long-term average, but we've normally taken between a dozen and 15 new units every year.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any more questions? You have one?
I know, I forgot it.
Oh, you,
I'm trying to bring it back, so I'll let you know.
all right.
So the next item, the fire and EMS services. I know you all had recently done a study, and so Lori included that, and then we both have our town reports in here as it relates to fire EMS services. So if you have any questions, I don't know everything about fire, but certainly we've got some information in the annual report. But I'd be interested as well to hear about your study and what your thoughts are after that.
I have a quick question. So again, so in the report, you have a combined EMS and fire. When did that actually happen?
Do you remember, Brian? Yeah, so yeah, all our EMTs are paramedics, and so it's combined, and so I guess it's been that way for a long time.
Okay, so even when you were you were originally all volunteer, and even when you were volunteer, you were getting fire / EMT combined?
Yep.
Cross-trained?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And then just, so when we talk through when Chief comes in, and then when we're through budget season, and then our CHEMS organization speaks, we hear a lot about we're all fishing from the same small pond. And so how have you found your resourcing of, specifically since you have even a higher layer of a combined fire and EMT, what are you guys seeing for your resources and fill in open spots and stuff?
I'd say we're pretty good. Our positions are full. We're struggling as everyone is with continually to the per diem piece. We've gone to more of a full-time department, so that's certainly assisted on that end. I think just recruitment in general is it's a struggle, and being remaining competitive in wages, recognizing we also have union contracts and other things, and how that plays in on those discussions as well. So I don't have any magic bullets around that, but we're pretty full staffed at this point.
Okay.
And we do offer training, so they don't have to be EMS paramedic certified. So they can be hired without that, and they receive that training while employed with Kennebunk.
And then you have either, so it's an EMT and/or paramedic layer, right? You don't make everyone come in as a paramedic?
No, they can become trained on the job.
But do they have to eventually become paramedic level?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, so everybody has to make it up to a paramedic level? Okay.
We just got the date on the 1982, since they've been combined.
That was phone a friend? That was Jay. Oh, Jay texted you?
So how many paramedics do you have?
Every one of them have to be. The whole force?
Yeah.
Full force.
Yes,
I think also,
working their way, exactly.
hey, Brian, I think, and I don't have our chief here tonight to back me up, but I think the majority of our calls are paramedic and rescue related as opposed to actual fires. But also bear in mind that many of the paramedic calls do require a fire person to go there as well. So the numbers may be a bit deceiving as to which ones we have the most of.
How many stations are there in Kennebunk?
Or
Four?
But one manned, and then the other one has volunteers.
Volunteers, the others, yeah.
I read, I read the packet.
Yeah, the
Four,
numbers-
one,
the
for
number-
Mary Beth.
The numbers are in the packet, too. I can't do quick math, but it's like 60% are rescue and medical.
So I guess this question is the flip then, because you asked us about the short-term rentals, so as our chief has explained to us, and you asked a question about, the report. So when Chief spoke to us last, he's outlooking a couple metrics that he's measuring, and he's predicting, roughly right, if things are trending this way, that maybe 2 to 5 years from now, we're going to be looking at bringing some per diem in, right? So we're still full volunteer. And so I guess then the question comes back to Kennebunk is, do you have any advice for us as we're starting to at least see it in the, we can see it in our near-term future? Is
One
there
thing-
anything that you've done?
Yeah, one thing that we did early on, because it's a tough hurdle to get from the expense difference between being a call department and being a full-time fire department is pretty high. So we utilized the SAFER grant, which did help pay for some of our manpower costs. You have to remember that every position in a fire department, once you get to the point that you're looking at it that way, remember that every one position actually involves 4 bodies, because that position runs 7 days a week. And you have people that come on and they're literally there 24 hours a day, and then the next day. So one position is 4 people, so you have to think about how many people you actually need to do your staffing. I'll take a look at what, I think, how many people did we have in SAFER this time? Was it 3, was it 1 position?
It was
4 people or 2
4.
positions?
Right.
Right. 2 positions, okay, so getting back to that, one of the things that we found with SAFER grant is that if you get the award for that, and we did have to put in several times to get that award, but the thing about it is, it used to be back in 2007 when we first started with the first SAFER grant, is that they go from paying 100% of the cost, then down. Now what's happening is they plateau it more, and then all of a sudden you fall off the cliff, and so that can create some budget shock too. So those are just things I would recommend you look at, because that way you begin to ease the voters into the idea that you're going into a more full-time department. I can guarantee you, you're going to find people from various other communities that'll come in, that'll be the people you hire. And as you do that, you also will start probably doing like we did, and that is bringing in some per diem people. And then what we're finding now is that becomes difficult right now, because of the ability to be able to attain. The reason why we've had to suddenly raise our hiring of full-time firefighters is because getting per diem people has been extremely difficult. So those are the things that we've encountered in the process, and that if you're considering starting to build into a full-time fire department. Right now, I think, doesn't your ambulance go through CHEMS, which is more of a private service?
Yeah, so that's,
So-
yeah. So we have CHEMS, which is private.
Yep.
And that's where, in this, in the combined packet, I think
Yeah.
Gloria included, some of the MRI report. And so when they spoke to us, they were talking to us about other towns in New England, and, when there was a private ambulance like we have, that they actually they hit that trip switch and they actually had to do the combined. And that's why I was interested in terms of your makeup of how many and what level do they have. And it's very interesting to me that you get to full paramedic. I mean, that's amazing, so.
And you need that. We, in our community is, as with everything in our two towns, there are parts of our town, there are things about our town that are different. We get
Right.
several calls a day just because of our nursing homes.
Right.
We have several nursing homes, and when somebody falls over, it just falls. The nursing people, because of concerns about litigation, will call our ambulance service to come out and just, see if, do an evaluation, see, and we need a paramedic for that. Do an evaluation, see if they need to go to the hospital, if they want to go to the hospital, or maybe just get them up and get them back to bed. So, we can't, that's where we are. So you run into that a lot too, not just the turnpike accidents that we get and the other many traffic accidents. And just the sheer number of miles of road that we have in Kennebunk creates logistical problems in terms of, the potential for more car accidents, getting, maneuvering truck fire apparatus to scenes. And also, from Brian's perspective, plowing and maintenance of roads.
That's a good question. How many miles do you have in Kennebunk?
Oh, boy. Brian, do you have that number? Ballpark number?
I'm just curious.
He's my highway director. Huh? 120.
50 or 60?
120 miles or 120? Road miles? You say about 120 road miles?
Surprised it's only 2. We'll keep repeating.
We have like
Yeah.
52 miles.
Yeah. Although your biggest stretch is Route 9 going out towards Bedford.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I think that if you're, looking to increase a force, people are looking for full-time jobs. And I think that, a volunteer department is great, but can you sustain that with volunteers? Younger kids, I mean, I don't know, maybe in Kennebunkport it's different, but it's hard to get young kids to volunteer to do something and sustain that, where I think they're looking for a job where they're gonna get paid.
But it's a whole culture. I mean, when I was in my 20s, I remember a friend of mine who joined the Kennebunkport Fire Department, and he used to, practice timing himself getting into his clothes for a call. I mean, kids are into it,
And now
They have
there's just
TikTok now to watch other people
Yeah.
do that.
and now the big thing is training.
19.
The big thing is getting your volunteers to keep up with the level of training that seems to be required at every stage.
Yeah, well, knock on wood, we have an excellent, group, we have a very excellent group of volunteers in Kennebunkport who showed up, bar none, hands down, when we had the storms in January. As Lori said, we probably never would have been able to get where we got if we didn't have our volunteer force. So that, there's always that other side of the coin, right? And that's why I think we've been trying to hold on, and not have to go to that because of the dedication that we do have right now in the town, which we're very grateful for.
And if I think back to my early days on the budget board at Kennebunk from 2004 on, I can tell you that we felt the same way. We didn't want to give up on our volunteers either, and it just got to the point that those that stayed in it were getting older, and we needed to eventually get people that could get in and do it.
Yeah, and that's why it's interesting to know what those, to your point, the people coming out of school, what levels are they looking for, because that's going to be your feeder, that's your feeder pool.
Right, and there are fire programs,
Right.
and so fostering them as interns, which we do in Kennebunk, I think is really important, and, paying for their training, and then they are more committed in staying, and I think that that's a great relationship to start with.
Yeah, I saw that in your packet that you had them staying at one of the.
Fire stations, West K, yep.
Yep.
So you get your volunteers, do they go to the other stations? I know you have one that's manned all the time, 24/7. Is your other 3 manned or no?
They are not manned, but they work at, they work at all of them if they're needed.
Yeah, Central's the only one that's manned full-time.
That's good, thank you. Very helpful.
Yep, they do great work. Thanks. And, yeah, we can certainly answer any other questions as you kind of figure out where you're going as a result, if we can be of any assistance to talk about our department and division and how their work how they've gone from volunteer per diem to full-time as well. Happy to do that. Next topic, behavioral health liaisons. So this year, you all included, we've had behavioral health liaisons for a couple of years. We have 2 folks working at the town of Kennebunk, and you all this year in the budget included about 10 hours, I believe, for to do some work as well, and I hope that's going well. And we really appreciate those folks and the work they do in Kennebunk with our police department. And we just, if you have any questions or you'd want to give us an update on how it's working with you.
I was going to say something funny, but people might not have thought it was funny. So, so I won't.
Better to keep that one to yourself.
I was thinking of Sheila. So, behavioral health liaisons, we started in July. We have the 2 behavioral health liaisons that Kennebunk has, and they're the employer. They come in and help us part-time. I'd say our police department was open to the idea and thought it would be beneficial, but I don't think they realized how beneficial until they showed up. They are also working with Allison, our Director of Public Health, on people who are in various types of crisis. They are good at assisting with additional resources for people who may need substance abuse issues, helping people get mental health, working through those corridors that are challenging in these days. They also assist police officers with calls. A lot of police officer calls are dealing with mental health issues, and so they're great at backing them up. But they've also been good with just our public safety staff in terms of their own mental health. And so they are a voice to talk to when people are challenged and maybe are a little concerned about reaching out. We, outside of public safety, we had our public works foreman pass away this summer very unexpectedly. And so they came in and talked to our public works crew, and we had a session with them about ways to deal with grief and grief in the workplace. And so everyone has been really, really pleased. I mean, it's not just having the behavioral health liaison, but Kennebunk actually hired somebody good. So they have been sorry, Lee J. They've hired 2 people good. So they have been a great resource, and the staff can't speak highly enough of them.
That's really good to hear. I've always been a big proponent of the behavioral health liaisons. I know Rachel and Tricia personally, and they are fabulous, and so it's great to see that we're expanding use of the liaisons.
And you're welcome.
We always work hard to step up for Kennebunkport.
We got a river that we'd like to sell you. At least half of it.
We don't own their half.
No,
At least that's.
we'll sell our half.
Okay. And then the last D on here, the wastewater outfall quality status. So Lori had forwarded me a memo on update in August that we sent to our select board regarding sewer and activities and all that was going on there. And so we included that in the packet, and we know that you all have been busy working on those efforts. And so any questions that the boards have, I know, and we had some discussion at one of our meetings as well, and appreciate all your discussions and update and information as the process has evolved as well. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, so while some people were enjoying the 4th of July weekend, we were getting calls, and so some odors and concern about turbidity and a plume developing in Kennebunk River. Came in around the July 4th weekend. It is not uncommon for our plant to see an uptake in food or waste during the 4th of July. That first week in July really ramps up. And so they call it a burp at the plant. You know, it's a chance for the creatures that take care of the biosolids to get to the same level as the food, and the food's a little higher. So everybody who had worked for the plant for many, many years, and those who had worked for the plant previously and gone on to work at other plants were notified, and they all said, this is what it is. Within a couple of days, you know, it was clear this is not what it was. It was not normal. And we were struggling to figure out what was wrong and what had happened. DEP came down and helped us look at all the data, both back in June as well as in July. And DEP staff said that they have never seen anything like this in their careers. But we had a massive die-off of our bugs. And so we still don't know why. We did do some testing beyond what DEP would normally have us do to understand whether we had gotten a chemical dose. That's what people think was the most likely, you know, pesticides or something of that nature. It is not uncommon for people to dump things down their drains or to go to a public drain. There are many, many input points. But we didn't find, I would say, a smoking gun. And by the time we did that testing, it was about a week after we had seen it. And so, you know, what we were testing is what we're still seeing in the plant at that time. So DEP suggested that we start reseeding. So it was like we had a brand new plant. So like you were starting a plant from scratch, but you had waste levels of an operating plant. And so we began reseeding, which is basically taking activated sludge from other plants. We first started with Sanford, and I mean, we're talking tens and tens of thousands of gallons we were trucking in. And we had, after getting about 60,000 gallons in, we had one good day, and we were like, yay, we're over this bump. And then it just kind of settled out again, and it stayed there. And, you know, we had DEP down a few other times. We had a gentleman who teaches wastewater for Southern Maine Community College. We had our engineers in. We had officials from everywhere coming to take a look and see what happened, and everybody kept saying, you're doing the right thing, it looks like you're doing what you should, but it's probably going to take you 3 life cycles for those bugs to recreate at the level you need them to, which is about 20 days. And that's what we saw. It was about 20 days. We continued to reseed. We started reseeding from Biddeford instead. Had, I think, some better luck, but it might have been timing. We also bought dehydrated bugs, and we added those to it, continued to test, and about 20 days in, we saw improvement. And since that time, after the incident was done, we actually were running at a higher efficiency than we did before. And the plant was running better than it ever had. And we're at like 98% efficiency anyway, so you can imagine how clear the water got. So during that time, people were very concerned, as you might imagine. We did put warnings out about people's contact in the river. It was interesting to have these conversations because with DEP, in terms of what your bacteria numbers are, they are much lower than actually when we test at the beach, and what those levels that are considered safe for people to swim at the beach. You know, we have a number that's probably 1/3 of that. And so that's what we were going from, even though at the beach it would have been okay. So we continued to monitor Colony Beach as well. We continued to disinfect. People had concerns about, they said they saw poop floating in toilet paper, and that's not what was happening at all, because if you know the wastewater treatment plant process, it's just not gonna be there. We continue to disinfect throughout the entire process. It's just that our chlorine residual was not staying where we wanted it to be. It would have highs and lows and not that consistency we were seeking. So it was a lot of lessons learned. We did have DEP come at our second meeting in July to talk to the board and the public about concerns and hear from them. Our Public Works Director has put a memorandum together that will be going to the board next Thursday night to talk about lessons learned. And of course, our concern is how do we do our best to prevent something like that from happening in the future? And because we are susceptible, like all wastewater plants, to people putting things in the system, and you can't predict that what's coming. It is very challenging to prevent it, but, how can we be so aware that we can see it as soon as something happens, and we would probably start reseeding sooner. So Eric is going to come to your next meeting and give you an update on that and talk about what we think are some valuable steps for the town to take in the future.
Quick question, if I may. Is there any information that you could share with Kennebunk Sewer Department to let, because the interesting part about it is that snuck up on you, and what concerns me is what happens if it sneaks up on us?
Yeah.
Because that's the Mousom River.
Yeah, you have some staff that used to work as our chief operator in Kennebunkport, so our staff was in communication with them all the time. And so certainly it became a big topic of conversation between all the wastewater plants in the state. We heard from a lot of them. And it wouldn't surprise me if we're a case study moving forward. But, yeah, there's been a lot of communication, and the support from the wastewater industry in the state was phenomenal.
Thank you for that.
Lori, I watched your first meeting where Eric presented to you. It was really fascinating, and I guess. So I was just wondering, when you're talking about steps you can take, as you just said, the best guess is that somebody may have dumped stuff into the system. Are you planning on putting out any kind of appeal to the public or educational outreach to the public to say, this may have been the problem, just a reminder?
Yeah. So I don't want to steal all Eric's thunder next week, but one of the recommendations on there would be a public education awareness campaign.
Yeah.
And as you know, you have to maintain those because people remember for a moment and then later they forget.
I just had a couple questions. So when you say you're testing, where are you testing at?
We are testing in the plant. So people were asking, are you testing at discharge? So we never test at the discharge point. We test right before it leaves the plant. I mean, we test at various points throughout the plant. But we didn't test in the river because we had nothing to compare it to, because we don't normally test in the river. So that's where we test, is at right before it leaves the plant.
And were you, before this happened, testing regularly or just assuming that things were functioning okay?
Oh, no. It's a very regulated system, and we have to comply with reports to DEP on a monthly basis.
So you're testing monthly then?
Oh, no, we test every week. Some things are being tested constantly. Other things they're incubator tests, so some take 5 days, some take, 48 hours. So there's various tests at different cycles.
I guess I'm just surprised that it snuck up on you. If you're testing regularly, why was the public reporting it before your sewer district?
Because we thought it was a burp, right? Yeah.
Well, people told me they started noticing it on July 3rd, July 2nd. They did not call us until July 4th. And so at that time, and that was odor at that time, and then the plume started later. We think the plume was all the dead bugs. So one of the things you test is certainly our chlorine residual was still working. There were things that were still working at the plant. And one of the things you test for are solids and settleability. And so when we're testing for solids, we were meeting our solids number. What we learned was that those solids were dead. And so solids is testing for your bug population. And so, you know, that's some of the challenges, is you've really got to be looking at the whole picture all the time and, you know, be doing a constant lookout.
So just to explain, I don't know if everybody understands how it works, but you have a population of bacteria that you want to have in the plant, and that's what eats the waste.
Yep.
And so in this case, your bacteria population was killed off, and that's what created the problem.
Well, I understand that. I'm just surprised that if you're testing regularly, it was a surprise. It seemed like it should have been something that was noticed quicker.
Because of this, you know, you're talking about a live system. It's like if you think of someone starving to death, that person doesn't shut down immediately. There are changes in their biological system over time. And so what happened was the chlorine residual and a lot of the systems, the aeration tanks were all working. It's just that, and there were probably some live bugs at some point, but it was dramatic. I don't know what hit us, but it was like that.
It was like overnight.
Well, it's described as the toxic.
Like overnight.
I would suggest, I'm going to make a suggestion, I mean, that I suggested to the general public when they're here, since it was my first month as selectman, and that's just what I was dealing with. I would suggest if you've never been to the Kennebunkport or the Kennebunk sewage treatment plant, you should go for a visit, and you should understand how it works. I think it was enlightening to find out how it works, how dedicated the staff was to solve the problem, but you need to know how it works in case it does happen, because then you can explain better to the public what is going on, rather than just assume no one's doing the job. And you need to know how the system works. It's a fascinating system. Go visit it. They'll be more than happy to give you a tour.
Yeah, and I'm not implying that people weren't doing their job. I was just wondering about the frequency of testing and why.
It's almost, some things are daily.
But again, to look for the live bug content, it's a 5-day process. You've got to let it incubate. So it takes time to get the enterococcus to grow in order to measure, you know, what the content is.
But if you're testing every day, then it should be, in theory, you have
5 days later, you'll know.
So you're not testing that every day. You're testing that once a week or twice a week.
Maybe we need to be testing more frequently.
No, there is a lag in how long it takes to grow.
Yeah,
So that you can identify.
I think part of this too is maybe some of the words from the DEP rep that was here. He helped us, he came Eric came in July and gave us a brief and stuff. And when we were talking with the DEP rep, you know, he was like, I've never seen anything like this in my whole career. So he knows all these operating plants in Maine. So this to him, so that gave the board an understanding that this was a one-off, huge thing that no one could have predicted, you know. And then now it comes back to like what Lori said, and Eric and the team showing up to the next board meeting, you know, to help us understand, you know, how do we get the live back system sooner, right? So how do we go from, if we ever go to T0 again, which is everything's dead, how do we get back to live system quicker, right? And I think, you know, kudos to all the towns that allowed us to take some of their, yes, that stuff, you know, and that was nice, yeah, in a weird way.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all that information about how that works and how you work through that problem. I would like in the future, if something were to occur, that there's more communication back and forth to the Kennebunk as well. So I know that's your problem, it's Kennebunkport, you're working through it, you're in the midst of it, but the more communication that you can share, because it's impacting both towns, I think would be helpful. So I would just add that piece to it. I would also add, you know, take it right back to the beginning where we started our conversation. This was unique this last summer, but we've had issues in the summer, previous summers, right? And it's not from leakage from the sewer treatment plant. It's like the summer before where we had so much rain that it flooded the rivers and we get beaches closed. I'm not exactly sure. I know that there's the river committee that probably spends some time on this, There's conversations about leaking septic systems up and down the river, having an impact on our beaches. I think if we were able to bring that part back into our sustainability conversation as well, that might be worthwhile. Those beaches have a huge economic impact on our towns. And having a reputation that our beaches are closed in the middle of summer, whether it's from rain, over too much rain or anything else, I think is something we should work hard to avoid as two towns working together. I'm not sure how we manage that across the river, but it is the river that has that outflow.
Well, the river gets tested by Healthy Beaches.
Yeah.
No, I understand it's tested. It's just, you're not going to avoid it if we get that much rain like we got, not this summer, but the summer before. It's going to overflow. Septic systems that are going to become under the water table are going to send all that straight down the
We
river.
are just starting to look at that, as a matter of fact.
I just want to make sure that that's included as part of our sustainability in our river committee, that's all.
And some of that, in fairness, comes from other towns, remember? The river isn't just.
Further up the road.
Yeah, because you get, I've heard tell of some farms further up that have had some seepage into the river, so I don't know, but.
And you guys are doing DNA testing.
Correct.
And we've just started talking about that. Because that's the only way you're really gonna know
Right.
what you've got and where it's coming from. Yep.
Great, thank you.
And I often wonder too, and I don't know, I know that boats today aren't the way that they were back in the 1950s and 60s where you open the valve and pump it out. But I wonder if some boats still are.
Well, yeah, I mean, even the modern ones, they still can do it if they don't want to pay the pump charge, so that's,
Yeah,
Thank you.
It only takes a valve.
yeah.
So our last item on here, affordable housing. So Kennebunk is currently, we're doing a housing assessment. We hope to have some results probably in a month or two and report back and look at what those potential gaps are and where we, some recommendations on how to address those housing needs. So that's kind of where Kennebunk is right now. And so we're interested to hear what you all are doing.
Are you having issues with rentals? We're trying to get people to get a rental.
Oh, yeah.
long-term rentals.
So
yeah.
you're, so you're in the same boat we are.
Absolutely.
That's a tough one to.
I will make a pitch that the Kennebunkport Heritage Housing Trust is in the process of building 6 units on Beechwood Ave. And if anyone would qualify for those home ownership units, they should look at their website. And when those come online, let's say within about a year, there could be some new homeowners, which they would look for residents of Kennebunk or Kennebunkport or the greater Arundel area, people who work in the towns. It's a great opportunity for some people to have a first-time home buyer. And so those will be coming online, let's say within the year, but I would encourage anyone who's interested to go look at the website and find out how that lottery is going to work.
Anything else going on? Any other business? You don't hear any other business. Would you like to close your select board
Sure.
meeting?
Can I have a motion to adjourn our Kennebunk Select Board meeting?
I'll move it.
All in favor? Oh, we have to, Courtney, are you still on?
No, she left.
She left, all right, then we can have a show of hands. All right. 601.
And I just wanted to thank everyone for getting together tonight. It's been
I-
great. We should do this more often. I think there's lots of opportunities for collaboration, so thank
I
you.
highly agree. I mean, I've been a selectman for 18 years, and we have never really had a dual meeting before that I can remember. So I think it's really been very beneficial for Kennebunk and Kennebunkport to meet occasionally, maybe once a year or something like that. Just kind of gather thoughts and see if we can work together more than we have in the past. I would love to see something.
And I do want to take this opportunity to thank Lori and Kennebunkport's board for hosting us this evening.
Yes.
And for that delicious lasagna, whoever's responsible for that.
Yeah, this is the first.
Yes.
I like
It's good. You and I were talking about that earlier.
What's that?
You and I were talking about that earlier.
Yeah, yeah. So, any other business for our board?
No, not tonight.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
Second.
I have a first and a second. All in favor? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. It's really good.